Well, good evening, everyone. Today is February 28th at 7 o'clock. We have a quorum present. We're going to call the meeting to order. And this meeting is being recorded. So we'll start with a roll call. Let's see, let me just make sure Jillian said she was going to join. Did you see her? Okay. Okay, if you see her, just promote her, but we have a quorum already without her. So why don't we just go around the room, state your name and say you're present.
Jeremy Marset, present.
Ed Bozella, present.
Steve Callahan, present.
Mather Eldred, present.
Ron Nelson, present.
Peter Michelson, present.
Okay. So tonight we're going to go through the agenda, which will start with the approval of some minutes. And for the February 13th meeting, hopefully everybody had a chance to look at those. I don't know if there's any comments or questions or.
I thought they were very good.
Okay, if not, then I'll entertain a motion.
Removed.
Second, okay. I think, Jeremy?
Yes.
Yes.
Yes,
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah,
okay, motion carries. All right, so those minutes are approved. We're gonna do the review of the Department of Public Works tonight. And the Council on Aging presentation we had on the agenda, but we're not going to do that tonight. It's going to get deferred probably to our next meeting. We're not quite ready yet. Right, did you want to make any comments?
So Christine can't make it tonight, so I'll be filling in, but
Okay.
we have a few updates as it just relates to state aid, which Jeremy and I negotiated last week. So that was exciting. We're making a presentation on the opioid stabilization fund as well. The Board of Selectmen reopened the warrant at their last meeting to add an article there, so we'll be getting a preview of that. Other than that,
Yeah.
the show is most.
So after we go through the Department of Public Works, we'll go into the pension and OPEB presentations. And Mike Pastori will join us for the OPEB one. He's going to join us remotely for that. So with that, Jeremy, turn it over to you and the
Sure.
Public Works.
All right, thanks. What we've got Maurice Goulet, who's the Director of Public Works. He's online and available to answer questions. Also tonight, Bill Harvey is here. He's the Chair of the Board of Water and Sewer. He's also here to help answer any questions related to that realm. They're gearing up to start their discussions, their annual discussions on how they set their water and sewer rates, and maybe Bill can give us a little overview on how that works and with the process they're at with that and the status of the water treatment facility and so forth. But in any event, in your packet, there's a summary of the proposed FY24 budgets for Public Works. Public Works has 8 total budgets that show up on the town warrant. 6 of those are general fund budgets, 2 are enterprise fund budgets. And those are water and sewer, and that means the enterprise funds are funds that are self-sustaining. They create their own revenues to offset their expenses. So they have water sewer rates that offset all those expenses. And we do not receive any funding from the general fund. In fact, the water and sewer enterprise fund have a indirect payment to the general fund that ends up being a revenue to the general fund. Kind of an acknowledgement that there's folks that work outside of water and sewer that do put in the effort to support that
Right.
with utilities, but
Promote Jill. Sorry.
yeah. So in the summary here, after going through, most proposed budgets for FY24, the 8 budgets, which are tree care, highway, equipment maintenance, solid waste and recycling, cemetery, water, sewer, and snow and ice. The first page of the summary put together is just a summary of the staffing that Mo oversees, which is approximately 30 full-time staff. Divided out into each of the divisions as laid out in the summary. And then just some high-level points of note and the proposed budgets and some of the budget drivers. Just talk about, and then I'll turn it over to Mo and Bill. But going down through the tree budget, being the first that comes up on the warrant, there's an 8% increase proposed there, and that's driven by the cost of police details and contracted tree services. So the total request there is $73,591. The next budget is the highway budget, one of the larger of the 8. Total request for FY24 is $1,548,436. That's a 3.23% increase from the prior fiscal year. Major increase drivers are salaries, steps, grades, and steps per the pay plan, which is common throughout these. You'll see all of these budgets have some sort of salary component. Most of them have a salary component that will be increased based on steps that employees are eligible to attain. Other notable increases in the highway budget are actually a correction here to the memo. It's only a $10,000 increase for highway materials, which go towards repairing and repaving the town's roadways, and also an update. Mo just updated the roadway surface rating, which is a metric that from 0 to 100, 100 being the best, the measure of how good our roads are, the surface rating of our roadway network. It's the way that he puts together his roadway maintenance plan. But actually the current number is 79.98, which is higher than I had noted here. So I believe that's an increase from the prior year, Mo. You're heading in the right direction.
Yes.
That's a B minus.
All grades.
Other items in the highway budget are increased utility telephone costs, mobile phone costs for additional tablets and the mobile plans that go along with those, so the field crews can have access to work order systems and GIS information. And also, the biggest being the stormwater management. The town is governed by a stormwater discharge permit. It's regulated by the US EPA, and it's a 5-year permit. Each year of that permit, there's more requirements for the town to comply with. And the compliance is estimated to cost an additional $25,000 for this coming fiscal year. So that's included in the budget. Next budget, cemetery budget. Total request there is $213,000, which is a 2.71% increase due to salary step increases and some modest contract service increases of $4,000. The next budget, the sidewalk budget, is level funded. The next budget, the snow and ice budget, is level funded. That's a budget that can actually be overspent and paid for in the next fiscal year, because you don't know exactly how much you're going to spend in snow and ice operations. But the budget there has been $293,000 for a number of years now, and it's proposed to stay level. Currently, there is $189,000 remaining, which is actually a pretty good place to be right now towards the end of the winter. So after today's activities, that might be a bit less, but that's actually looking pretty good compared to other winters. The next budget, the solid waste budget.
Excuse me. If, just my curiosity, if we don't spend all the 189,000 or so,
Yeah.
does that go into free cash, or does that get rolled over into next year's budget?
It will be rolled into free cash. It'll be available for end of year transfers if needed by the balance departments out, but If not, then it would roll to free cash for the next year.
Okay.
Good question.
And I'm just doing a summary here. If you have more detailed questions, once I get through the summary, please, feel free to ask Mo or any of us, but, just wanted to get through the summary. The solid waste budget, next budget, total request $631,794, which is a 0.96% increase, mostly with salary adjustments. And a little bit more maintenance, as the transfer station's aging and needs a little bit more maintenance, facilities upkeep. Some of those accounted for that. The next budget is the equipment repair and maintenance budget. That's the maintaining the town's fleet of vehicles and equipment. That's proposed to be $467,800 and I have a typo there. I think I have an extra 8. $467,585, which is a 3.78% increase. Again, there's the salary components, step and grade increases, and a fairly large increase for the cost of fuel. This covers all the fuel for the town's fleet, whether it be police cruisers or fire trucks or public works vehicles. That's an additional $15,000 for the cost of diesel and unleaded, which is a 28% increase over the prior year. And then there is the water budget, which is proposed to have an approximate 18% increase, with a total request of $1,247,041. And major increased drivers being salary adjustments, some additional equipment repair services, and the cost of electricity. So these being enterprise funds, all of their expenses must be put in here. So electricity to run the water and sewer facilities must be in the enterprise funds, whereas in the general fund, it's all aggregated into one facilities budget. Electricity is included in the water and sewer budgets. And there's an increase of $130,000 proposed for the water budget. It's very energy intensive to pump water around town, draw it out of the ground. So that is a fairly large increase. And this budget accommodates for the additional operating costs for the new water treatment facility out behind off Elm Street. So that being some water supply, water treatment chemicals, some testing, water lab testing that's needed, and some contract services. And then the final budget is the sewer budget, with a proposed funding amount of $1,380,967 for an 8.4% increase, mostly due to the cost of electricity. Again, running the wastewater treatment facility, there's a lot of pumps that drive the water through that. There's an additional cost for electricity proposed $75,000, and some additional contract services and sludge disposal costs, as the cost of services is kind of gone up. The budget has been adjusted accordingly. So those are all the budget, the high points. Mo, did you have anything more? One other thing in your packet is Mo's draft annual report for 2022. So there's a lot of metrics in there that if you haven't had a chance to read and get more context about all the things that Mo's department does, it's in your packet. With an advanced screen copy of what you see that'll be published later on, but that's in there for your viewing pleasure. Mo, did I miss anything, or do you want to add anything, or any content coming up?
No, you covered a lot of it. I think there's a few caveats to a lot of these budgets, reasons why it's such large increases in certain things. Like you said, with the water treatment plant coming online, our electricity costs were based on increases that we were before negotiations that the town has taken place in. It went from 9 cents to 15 cents for the kilowatt per kilowatt hour, which also includes transmission and distribution for the electricity. We do have a solar array down at the wastewater treatment plant that we have to pay for the electricity up front. And then the energy credits, the SRECs get put back in, but it comes in as revenue. So it doesn't go back into our operating budget, but it's still there as revenue. So that's why, we have to come up with those costs up front to pay for the electricity, and then we get that back in as revenue.
Is that a complete offset or like 50% or what's your estimate of how much?
I don't think it's a complete offset, but I believe, it's the supply and demand with the SRECs, the energy credits. They were worth more back in previous years, and they diminish over the years. But we do create a lot of electricity from that solar array. We are putting one on the DPW garage building as well, so that's going to offset some of the costs in the future. That's almost ready to be put online as well. But as far as the enterprise funds, we based it, and Frank can probably elaborate more on the energy. It's not a negotiated price yet, so the prices have fluctuated. But at 15 cents, the 40% increase with the water treatment plant coming on board, there's also a sheet in there that shows an additional $268,750 for operation and maintenance of that facility, which is on the conservative end. So, we, as far as electricity, it was budgeted at an extra 193,000. I budgeted 130, which is $60,000 less, only because it does get subsidized. That's at full build out of the water treatment plant. If we were to use the water treatment plant and all of the water we're allowed to use out of that plant, which is not going to be a reality. We're not going to use it at full capacity at all times. So we have to be reasonable about how we're going to figure out how much extra to use. And if it's a high estimate for this year, we want to make sure we have enough money in that budget. If it's high and we find that we have excess, we would be able to reduce that next year. But with that being said, if we have a breakdown in one of the wells, we have to use wells 3 and 4 at capacity. That's the total amount of money that our consultants had estimated the value to be.
Yeah, Mo's
So,
in your packet, Mo's referring to this table that he put together for the operating costs for the new water.
Can I ask a question on that? Maybe Frank, you can chime in here. So on that sheet that Mo's referring to, which is the water treatment, it seems like the 193,000 is estimated off of a 0.26 kilowatt per hour. And I know you've for the whole town, you've used a lesser number, right?
So, yeah, so the town.
0.15 or,
So the town and the school departments procure our electricity in a joint contract.
yeah,
We go through basically what is a broker for nonprofits called Power Options. Our contract for, again, both the town and school runs to the end of this calendar year, which unfortunately is in the middle of the upcoming fiscal year. The rate that we have right now that we signed on to in late 2020 is pretty good. It's just south of 9 cents, like 8.9 or something. When Mo was beginning this analysis and the rest of us were trying to get our budgets ready for sort of the end of December, the markets indicated a jump of up to around 14, closer to 15 cents. And that is only the generation charge. That does not include delivery. So that's only like when you get your bill from EverSource, that you use this, and then here's $500 extra for turn the light switch on at this hour or whatever it is. So
that 26 is both delivery and supply.
Right.
yes,
Got it.
yes.
Yeah, got it.
And so what we're in the middle of right now is trying to figure out when to sign an extension to that contract. The energy markets have ticked back down a touch. They're down in the closer to 12 to 13 cents, depending on how long we would extend the contract for. But again, that's only for the delivery. It does not include, or excuse me, that's only the generation charge. That does not include delivery.
Okay.
So the increase is basically for half a year,
Yes,
which is what the school did, 128%.
yeah, they averaged the
Right.
year, yeah.
And
We're
there,
gonna see this throughout all the budgets.
Right.
In the departments, so.
If that could be a correction factor that you should probably apply across all the budgets, really.
and I was kidding before about the delivery aspect of the bill. There is a little bit more of a science to it. There is a science to it, but they vary by facility. So the delivery charges for town hall, and I know we're getting off topic here, Steve, I apologize, but
Okay,
the delivery charges for a building like town hall are very different from a school or public safety. So they vary, you know, by department. So it's hard to say it's going to go up X% townwide because those
Right.
delivery fees make up such a good chunk of the bill. It's hard to say.
Right.
Do the charges also vary on whether it's single or three-phase power? Like industrial power? I mean, what puts these lights on is single phase.
Yeah, I'm not sure.
Because that comes into bear with the water treatment plant. And in the water and wastewater plants themselves, primarily being driven by three-phase power.
Yeah, maybe.
Whether it's uninterruptible rates or interruptible rates, there's different ways when you're dealing with industrial power. Those contracts will probably, well, I'm sure you're covering the basis with that.
Yeah, we're and maybe the report that consultants drew up for the water treatment plant would have more specifics to that facility.
Especially in a new facility.
Right.
You know, it's a dedicated line. It's out there.
yeah,
So that's, I guess, the background. So you know,
okay, no, that's helpful, like,
I
think-
one thing to add in the context of putting the budget together for the water treatment plant, you know, it's as Bo said, it's based on assuming sort of worst case, if you will, it's being operated a fair amount. And just like the general fund has free cash, the enterprise funds have retained earnings. So if budgets are not spent, it rolls to retained earnings. So it's retained earnings is the free cash equivalent in an enterprise fund. So so the money's not lost. It rolls into retained earnings.
yeah. And this, water treatment, all these costs is 268, that's all factored into the rate setting that goes on, right?
Yeah, the board of water and sewer we have not reviewed these budgets yet.
Okay,
That's an upcoming meeting this Friday.
okay,
So we've so far where we are in the process is the setup is that we do a revenue variance analysis because we bill in April and October. And so we look at how we're pacing for revenue collection for both of those periods. The April one is pretty steady because people don't use their variation in water use in the winter. It's not very much, but the summer, that's the big wiggly worm that we have to tackle. And so it's where I was with Frank and the rest of his team today to look at how we're doing on a revenue basis. So we're preparing our model by looking a little bit backwards in time, which is this current fiscal year, to prepare the model with the anticipated revenues to close out this fiscal year to see how we were pacing both on an expense line, which we monitor every month, but also on a revenue line. But as Mo said, that we have a new facility, and we have to plan appropriately and accordingly, and we probably will flex after we run that new water plant after a year. And like you said, it's gonna be one of our those similar capacity to well number 6, and we'll flex them as we need to, both from a water resource management, but also from a cost perspective. We're going to know how much it costs to generate water from this facility. It has a giant sunk cost, but it has a small variable cost, but it still does have a variable cost, and that will be both the energy losses that go through the filter system, as well as the incremental amount of chemicals that are used to affect the chemical reaction and that is happening inside the filter media itself. So
Yeah.
we're going to learn after the first year. But like I said, we as a board, we haven't fleshed through these, both the.
When will you sort of get through, these numbers and approve them?
Oh, well, we're gonna probably, the intent of our meeting on Fridays, outside of meeting minutes, is to grind through
Okay,
these budgets. And we've already talked in the last several months about the capital plan. The variable that is still, we still have to settle into our rate model is the grants that are available through the county mechanism of ARPA. And there's a different process that goes through that mechanism, as you probably know. And then specifically when projects get to go above a threshold of 225 or 250, then has to go through a federal procurement mechanism. So there's some, we still have not sort of red line, green line, some of the different projects on the sewer side. So we haven't put that into the model yet to, is it gonna be funded by ARPA or not? Because that'll tend to drive the funding for those projects. And these projects that we have are, there are several of them, but they're all not big. So it's not like we can go to capital markets and use debt. We actually have to use, retained earnings to pay for this. So, so we have to spread some of these out, but if we run into a really big project sometime in the future, we would go to capital markets on a debt basis.
And that's a good thing to note. Just like the operating budget, the capital that is related to water and sewer is funded by the enterprise fund. So the debt service that they might bear for borrowing to build a project,
Right.
or if it's cash capital using retained earnings, that's all out of the enterprise fund, the water sewer enterprise funds, not the general fund.
we have a separate article to approve this water and sewer enterprise fund budgets, right?
It's maybe under the same article, but it's got a
I'm
separate.
not sure it was the same article.
Yes,
Same article,
it's
okay.
separately accounted for.
But all your budgets basically get approved at town meeting, right?
Yes, they do. Before it used to be a separate article. Last year, it was all the same as with all the other.
So would we have you back once you finalize all the numbers?
Sure.
Okay,
So our process is that we're not going to get ahead of the town's process.
mhm,
We're not going to set rates until the capital articles and the operating budgets have been approved. So we wait until after that. So town meeting is May 1.
well, the warrant gets printed at the end of March,
Right.
so we kind of have to have everything settled by then.
But we don't set, what I'm getting is we don't set the rates until later.
Oh, yeah, no, the rates, the rates are, yeah.
Some.
I wasn't talking about rates, I'm just talking about the actual budget.
I mean, it is common. I mean, the board and the Board of Water and Sewer and the Warrant Committee kind of come together. It's not any
Yeah.
magic as far as who hears the budget first per se.
Okay.
It comes together in the end.
If you want to see us again, we'll be here. Yeah, we'll come here.
Okay. All right, Mo, we sort of got off
Only
track.
One other thing is that the new water treatment plant is going to be commissioned this spring. Probably, depending on, shaking out all the bugs and approval by the DEP to bring it online. It's pointing in the direction of coming online before that big water use season. So that's pretty important. The second thing is that it's pacing to have a considerable contingency left over from that. So we went out and borrowed money, and the bids for the general contractor as well as all the other smaller contracts that came part of that came in substantially below budget. So not only is the project tracking the budget so far, fingers crossed. But even from the beginning, it came in substantially lower. So we foresee that the money that was borrowed for that would be set aside for a future or other future projects to be spent in water. So basically, through the bond, we're paying for that money. And so that the money is not being spent on the filter project, if there's a water main project or something else, that money is there. So
What was
that
the,
would be
what
part
was
of
the
debt
rate,
schedule.
what was the rate on the borrowing, George?
It was like
Remember?
1.436.
Wow,
It was bananas. Yeah. Yeah. You want to talk about hitting the bottom?
home run.
So that balance can be reappropriated at a later date for a water type project.
Yeah.
Do you have to keep a certain amount in retained earnings? Like we have free cash policy?
So when we strive to keep about 1 million in free cash, that we are not able to hold to that. It goes up and down. Based on water use, based on also capital projects that we fund through retained earnings. If we need to, I don't know, pick your favorite project, Mo. If there's a water main break or something like that, or if we plan to replace a water main and it's $800,000, we'd have to sort of save our way into retained earnings to pay for that, because $800,000 isn't enough money to go to the capital markets to put that on a debt as a debt, on our balance sheet that way. Now, it can be said, well, if you combine a bunch of projects, that's true, but we're on the water side, we're not at a place where we have that many large identifiable capital projects that could be, bonded together for something like that. So it's in that place where something gets uncomfortably large, it has to come from the retained earnings. And so that's why and that's both from the wastewater and the water production side, is we've been targeting that. And there are times where we've been at 1.3 and we've dropped before like 400.
Is there any state guidance as to minimum level?
There was a study by Frank's predecessor that said it was about
Nick,
and the figure came in, I think, for someone of our size,
Right.
class, amount of water that we are, I think it was about 300 or 400, but it's a little bit of apples and oranges when you go from plant to plant. In our budget, when you take everything out, we have about 95% fixed cost and 5% variable costs. So we can't save ourselves. We can't save our way into prosperity. We can't save our way into something. And actually, on the other, it's more on the other side. It's better for as from an enterprise fund that we actually use a reasonable amount of water and pace to what we expect to pump and expect to receive as revenues. Is it better for that we pump a little bit more water, we sell it a little more? We'd love to, sell water to customers, obviously within a regulatory reason. But if we can sell more water when we're not under water restrictions, that will, literally becomes, a rainy day fund for us on a retained earnings basis.
and one question that, Jeremy, maybe you know the answer to this, or Bill. So there's this, there are these reserves, I guess, and there's is there like a percentage of either 20% or 30% of reserves that we have in our financial policy, and I forget what the percentage is it 20 or 30%?
Well, I mean, there's a reserve, just like the general fund, there's an emergency reserve
Yeah,
budget line. that, if not used, gets rolled into retained earnings. But the only other reserve beyond that would be the retained earnings. There's no other stabilization fund or
Okay.
the like.
We have a single line item for an emergency. Something that's out of budget that rolls over. It's about 50 grand for water and 50 for sewer.
So what's the amount that DLS tracks? They have like a,
Retained earnings.
it's retained earnings. I think it's at 30% or something like that, 30%.
And it's gonna vary in that, depending on the capital plan that's put together and the expected funding source or planned funding source for a capital project. There may be a reason to increase the retained earnings to fund it with cash, with retained earnings, rather than borrow. Especially now that the interest rates are going up, and generally the markets want bigger, smaller borrowing,
Right.
so.
So what that could do is actually push a project from, whatever, 2026 to 2027.
Yeah,
So we can self-fund it from the retained earnings, with another year of retained earnings. So
Yeah.
that's some of the math that's coming into play, with the change in interest rates. And also I think that,
so do you try to balance like the level of those retained
Yeah, I
earnings?
mean, what
It's a bit,
DOR is looking at is just the variability of revenues from a water sewer enterprise fund. Because it depends on how much water you sell.
Yeah.
If it's a dry year or wet year, people are irrigating more or less. The retained earnings is that buffer from year to year to a revenue shortfall.
Yeah.
So there are years where the expenses are a little bit more than the revenues. And then you dip into retained earnings to cover that. So that's really what the DOR is concerned about, is to have enough retained earnings to cover that variability from season to season. But in addition to that, the prudent capital planning is to have, you plan to use your retained earnings for capital.
for capital, right?
So that's.
Which we have a history of doing and plan on doing.
Yeah.
and that's the reason why we do a mid-year, revenue variance analysis is to help us understand, how did we do in the last budget? How are we pacing?
Yeah,
And do we have to make up for, are we gonna have to go into retained earnings? At the end of this fiscal year, to cover expenses. So,
Okay.
right now, the sewer budget is the revenue that we expect. For sewer is pacing close to what we expected for revenue. Water actually is pacing to be slightly under, but considering the fact that we had to go to water restrictions, tier 4, the earliest that I could ever remember.
Yeah.
I don't think that our shortfall is going to be that large that the existing retained earnings can't, get through.
okay.
When you set rates, do you set it to break even? Is that the?
No, we set rates.
I don't think
We
so.
set rates with we set rates basically with sort of like a 10-year look of our capital plan and our operating plan.
Okay, so you're
So
looking at-
that, because
All right.
it gets a little lumpy. in
There's a
time.
lot of assumptions.
Right,
Yeah,
right.
a lot of
Yeah.
assumptions.
So it's like we have a couple
So you
of
gotta-
projects,
You
yeah,
gotta look forward.
yeah,
There's no profit included, but
Yeah,
you're looking forward to try to be efficient.
Yeah.
Right.
at the end of the day, we're trying to keep that retained earnings at some reasonable level. And that's really our true measure
Right.
of that,
I got it.
Mo and his Cracker Jack team are, they're managing, a very, for a town of the size, very sophisticated network, both on the water and wastewater side. Not every town has both of those services. And there's gonna be some, some unknowns, with that, and the retained earnings is a cushion for some of those unknowns.
All right, well,
This question may be way wacky, but last year, as you pointed out, we had a remarkably dry summer. But what if that's sort of the new normal? What if we're having lots, maybe not 10 years out of 10, but 7 or 8 years out of 10, we have very, very dry summers? Do you have to make projections, or in other words, to what extent does that kind of meteorology factor into your projections, or can you just not consider that?
good
How
question.
about if you can uncover the question a little bit?
So I'm assuming if we have a really dry summer, which is gonna limit what you want people to pump. You made a reference to wanting to pump as much water as you can to sell a bunch of water. Well, there's gonna be a summer like last summer where there's restrictions put in place because we don't have that much water underground. Is that basically right?
Well, I mean, the water use restrictions are not necessarily governed by true science.
No, we have permits, there are a couple of things that come into play with how much water that we can pump and the types of water conservation measures and those triggers. Some of them are on the stream flow at the Charles River, others are actually on a regional basis. That are set by the Massachusetts Drought Task Force. And they have their own methods of auditing the water flows and stream flows in entire regions and across multiple basins. So which means it's not just where is it dry here in Medfield? It's more like, an entire region.
So those use restrictions are not directly related to the actual groundwater table at
Right.
these wells. And they're the municipal well supplies, the wells are far different from what you have at your home. They're much more reliable. They're different. They have a lot more productivity. They've been designed a different way. It's very, very low risk that we're gonna run out of water.
No, but from a revenue
The
basis-
water use restrictions can, help with that because they limit the amount of water that folks could use, but in reality, there's more water down there than we're allowed to use. So there's not a risk we're gonna run out.
There is a strain on our infrastructure as well. So, in the summer when everyone wants to water all at once, or in the spring when they want to establish their lawns, our two storage tanks, one's a standpipe and one's a pedestal at the state hospital. Once those levels drop faster than we can pump the water into it, it becomes a little bit dangerous to our system. And that sometimes we have to put restrictions on to limit what people can use at that time as well. Once it goes down to a certain level, you lose pressure, you lose the ability for, just for anything, just like fire suppression or even drinking water. So, the strain on the infrastructure when everybody's watering all at once, sometimes we have to do that as well. So.
Yeah, that's a good point, Mo, that it's the infrastructure's ability to serve that will drive how much water, if everything is at 100%, then we can blend from one water, more than one water source, and we're able to comply with our permits that are within each of the water basins as well as the total, and we're able to load balance, freely. If something needs maintenance for a period of time, that means, another part of the infrastructure needs to be used, but the ability to serve is the very first. We've actually created a sort of a decision tree, so to speak, that, is everything okay? Then you can do this. If this is the situation, then this is how it kicks into different.
But
I think what you're hinting at is in the future, if water use is lower and that becomes more the norm, what do we do about it? Well, by having about 95% of our cost fixed, in a way, the revenue will have to come to address the fixed costs.
the rates are gonna go up.
The cost per unit go up.
Right, the
Yeah.
cost per unit would go up in
The
that
only way to
case,
do it.
right?
And it's kind of accounted for, over time, the way that the rates are set, you're looking at usage continuously. So as a new norm develops, you're kind of tracking that as you're developing.
But Mike, I guess to ask Peter's question a different way. When you do your 10-year projections, what's the assumption on how many out of those 10 years, how many of those years will be like last year?
Does that make a difference or does that not make a difference at all? to your budgeting?
So it's not an easy question to answer for two reasons. One is that if you go back in time, maybe about 7 or 8 years, we were pumping a lot of water. And we had a lot of water leaks and water mains. We were losing 30 to 34% of the water that came out of the ground through, the water mains were not tight.
Yeah.
And water was just ending up, underground. And so that has been cut down in half. Now it's actually going close to what the current target is, around 15% or so. And that is very typical, 15%. And the state's target is 13%. So we're very close to that. But also that back then there was quite a bit of variability in the demand function of what people were using. So that's what makes it difficult. Also now, what is the price of water, so to speak, is basically double what it was 6 years ago because of all of the improvements that we have made. New water tank, 5-point-something million, rehabilitated the other water tank, I don't know, $500,000, something like this. This plant here, bonded it, at 12 million. So
Right.
there's been, and it doesn't mean that that's sort of the end, but we've had to increase our rates, and this is just across all rate structures to accommodate, because we have this sort of line of sight of this project in this year, this project in this year, and pacing that so that we've been trying to reasonably ramp the rates so that people don't get shocked like all of a sudden in that 1 year, and also to be transparent with what their plans are and what the expenditure ramp looks like.
Okay.
Well, while we have you, is there, just don't need me to put you on the spot, anything that we should be looking at as a concern over the coming years from a budget perspective?
I was just going to mention that, we belong to the Southeastern Regional Service Group. It's a 27-town consortium. So we do get better pricing on different things. However, some of the concerns that we've been seeing are chemicals, water and sewer chemicals, fuel, and electricity is not part of this, but those are going to be, I believe, the water and sewer chemicals have gone sky high. The fuel is based on the Boston low. So basically that's the base price that we go off of. And when they bid the fuel, they bid as a bid increment above the Boston low. So the Boston low was anywhere between, before COVID, it was $1.67 to $2. Now it went up as high as $5 a gallon. Now we're down to $3.83, which is still double of what it should be. So, it's hard to develop a budget to cover the costs without going extremely over or extremely under. So we try to do the best, educated, numbers that we can put out there. So those are some of the concerns we have for the next coming years. Our cemetery, you'll see, we put some more for contract services, and it's unfortunate that during COVID we had a lot of services at the cemetery. And a lot of lots are being sold. A lot of the events happening over there, which is not a good thing for any town. But we have to look at that. And in our warrant article for this year, we're looking for a cemetery expansion to put more lots to finish the rest of the cemetery, to add more lots. So we are doing more business than we really want to tell you the truth, but we have to find the money to cover those costs.
Thanks, Bob.
That's good.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Any other questions for Mo or Bill? Anything that, well, thank you very much, Mo.
No, thank you, guys.
As usual, very nice presentation and with all the details there. Appreciate all the time you put into it. and all the
Thank you,
time
Jeremy.
you dedicate to the town. We appreciate.
Oh, thank you all.
Bill, thank you.
Oh, my pleasure.
Yeah. Jill, did you have any comments or questions? I don't see your hand raised, so I'm assuming you're okay.
No, I'm good. Thank you.
Okay, all right. All right. I guess, anything else we want to cover on the departments there, Public Works? Okay,
That covers it.
okay,
Thank you, Jeremy.
all right.
All right. Enjoy your
Uh,
night. Thank you.
Thank you, Mo.
Thanks, Mo.
Oops,
All right, so the
I don't know,
Oh, yeah, I'm still.
you killed off.
Nope, sorry, I'm pulling up,
Jill's still on, so.
Oh,
Yeah, that's just our room, I guess. I guess we probably, once you get that fixed, we probably could go to we'll go to I'll go to start the pension, I guess, and waiting for Mike Pastore is gonna join us at 8. So about 7 minutes. If I could start the pension, and then when he gets on, we can do the OPEB. Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
No, you're right.
Yeah.
That's, this is more, I mean. It's exactly.
So let me know when you are able to make that work with the PowerPoint. So we thought we would go through the pension, exciting pension budget. It is a big number, but Jeremy, I know you have to get the lead, but so feel free to. We have a quorum, so feel free to lead. The next slide is the agenda. So on the pension budget, it's about $3.3 million. And we're just going to take you through sort of the background of the retirement system, the Norfolk County retirement system. Talk about how it's funded and some of the actuarial assumptions around the valuation of the unfunded piece. And then go through some discussion about this reserve fund that's been set up. It's a stabilization fund to help with offsetting some of the increased costs that come through with the county retirement system. So maybe we can go to the next slide. Next slide after that. Yeah, so the background is basically that this is a multi-employer defined benefit plan that covers 41 units within Norfolk County. That's not all necessarily all towns, those are units. So there could be, like Medfield, I think, has 2 units, what the Affordable Housing Trust plus the town. The benefits around, so this is a countywide retirement system. The benefit, it does not, this does not include the teachers, okay? So this is everybody except the teachers. So the system provides for retirement benefits up to a maximum of 80% of a member's highest 3-year annual rate of compensation for anyone hired prior to 2012 April, and then it's the average of a 5-year highest annual average rate for anyone that was hired after that date. And they're based upon, basically there's a formula. It's based upon the, how old somebody is, their length of service, level of compensation. And they basically become vested in the plan after 10 years. And go to the next slide. So they contribute under Mass General Law to the plan. And the employees' contribution, they contribute rates ranging from 5 to 9% of gross compensation. And everything over 30,000, there's an extra 2% contribution. So it's a pretty, it's a sizable contribution that they have to make. And the town is required to pay into the retirement fund a mandated actuarial assessment that's apportioned among all the people who participate in the county. And it's a portion based upon number of active employees, basically the payroll. So there's, as you can imagine, when they started these retirement plans, they were unfunded for a long period of time. And the state put a mandate in that you have to have all these unfunded liabilities funded by I think it's 2040. I think Norfolk is on an accelerated schedule. They're trying to do it by 2029. But everybody has to have these things funded by 2040. So the next slide is basically this is the history of the assessments that have come from the Norfolk County pension plan just for Medfield. So this is Medfield's piece. And you could see, we've had some really big increases going back to 2019. They were close to 10%. They've come down, 7%, then they came down to 5 and 7. This year, and George, I might ask you to help me out on this. They changed the formula on how they assessed. And so we actually had a decrease in our assessment of 3%.
Good work, Georgia.
The details on what exactly changed?
Yes, it's actually, they changed their assumption this year, and we believe they changed the assumption because we're getting closer to being fully funded. As far as Medfield is concerned, when they looked at our population, our current employees in the unit, we had less police officers at that period of time when they were looking at our enrollees. Police officers are your most vulnerable unit within the system. So that was the major part of our decrease. The second item was the fact that the age of the members within the unit were much younger than the members in the units of other towns. And I believe there was a third item too, and I'm trying to think of what it was.
I think the other piece of this decrease on the slide is the fact that we've assumed we're going to pay it all in one payment.
Yes.
That was actually a big piece of it. Yeah.
And these past few years, so Norfolk County gives each member unit the option of paying it all at once on July 1st, which is pretty hefty. You have a $3 million payment on July 1st. You've just dished out almost $2 million plus payroll taxes for your summer payroll for your teachers. And you haven't had much revenue come in since May 1st from your property taxes. So it truly is, it's a commitment that Medfield has dedicated itself in doing. We prepaid on July 1st, but we also did it for a reason. We prepaid on July 1st. We appropriate the higher figure. However, by prepaying it, the county gives us a discount of 2%. And what we started doing was that discount, we would appropriate it the next year and we would invest that into our, the state account that Steve was referring to, into our pension reserve account,
Yeah.
our stabilization, our other post-employment benefits.
So, we'll go to the next slide, I guess. So this is, they have actuaries that they pay a lot of money to do evaluation of what the liability is, the unfunded liability. And they do it for the whole county. This is our piece of it. The 2022 piece, which was as of January 1st, 2022. The caveat here is this was right before the interest rates started to go up and this stock market crashed. So don't expect this next year, you know. So, you know, but they do predict, make assumptions about investment returns, life expectancy, inflation, the discount rates, and they have, you know, projected salary increases. So there's a lot of assumptions that go into this, but, you know, the trend is in the right direction here. And so, you know, we're at 16 million.
Net.
That's the
unfunded.
That's the net. That's the net, yeah.
So it's unfunded.
Unfunded,
Yeah.
right, yeah. So maybe go to the next slide and you can get a quick picture of what the funding, actually, the funding schedule. So this is, now this is for the whole plan, but it gives you an idea of what they're thinking of. So this is the whole county's funding schedule. And this was just recently published in December. So you could see, you know, they're 71.8% funded. Okay, the plan is to next year that'll be 74.6, and they have a plan to get it fully funded by the end of 2029. You know, beginning of 2030, basically. And so, you know, it's not that far away, you know, 5-6 years. You know, they've, if you look at that, it's I guess it's the fourth column in that says employer total cost with interest. That's the, you know, that looks like it's going up about, you know, 5% a year, you know, 4.5%, 5% a year. So, and then what happens is in 2030, there's a huge drop. I mean, it just falls off. But once it's fully funded, the assessment goes way down. And so the plan is to, you know, make it to 2030. Because once you get there, there's a big bonus, right? You've got a big piece of your budget that is no longer going to be there. And so, you know, the big caveat with a lot of these assumptions is that they're using this 7.75% discount rate. And PARAC, which is the state, they're the state regulator or for pension funds. They have historically included in their approval of this funding schedule a commentary about this discount rate and how they don't like it. They say it's very high. They say that compared to other towns, it's high, and you know, there's very few plans that they look at that have this type of a discount rate in it.
Wonder what the unfunded liability would be if you moved to use the 6.75 instead of 7.75, or that 16 would go to 20 or.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a footnote in our financial statements. They do show a 1% variance either way, and what the impact is on the liability. I forget what it is. I don't have those numbers now, but it drives it. I think it's $2 or $3 million difference, you know, I think.
That probably drives that.
Yeah.
And
Our
the
six-
230 3 or 4 years.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. So anyway, when you go to the next slide, so, yeah, sorry.
I understand this very, very imperfectly, but the 7.75 is set by what entity?
That's the Norfolk County Retirement System in consultation with their actuary. The actuary probably recommended it. So they hired their own actuary. They came up with that discount rate and, you know,
And so effectively the state is saying.
Well, the county, oh, the state, yeah.
The state, Parent is
Yeah.
saying, we really disagree with your actuary?
But they approved it. And they think the reason they approved it is because there's such a short period of time between now and when they're saying it's gonna be fully funded. So they said, we disagree with your actuary, we disagree with this rate. We're approving it. They approved it, so it's, you know,
That's the other thing, Peter, is you go to the other thing, the long-term investment returns, the life expectancy, the inflation rates, the projected salary, all of those are variables as well. And
Yeah.
that's just one of the 5 variables that
right.
it's such a.
It's a complicated calculation.
Tough thing to estimate.
Yeah. So you know, we had a very smart town administrator a long time ago who, Mike Sullivan, who created a pension reserve trust fund with $10,000 in 1978. And there were some additional contributions to this, but you know, it's now at $3.3 million. There's been limited history of taking money out of this. It's been pretty much limited to sort of some interest earned in the account over the years. So it's built up to quite a balance, and we're at the point where, you know, you kind of, between now and when this is fully funded, you sort of have to take advantage of this. That's the purpose of it. It's a stabilization fund. It's there to help smooth out these increases. And so so that's what this pension reserve trust fund is there for. The next, yeah.
So that means that we probably don't have to use any of that this year, given that the payment is going down.
Well, that was one thought, but the other, we'll talk about that on the next slide. Let's go to the next slide. So this is by the way, the budget. So last year we used 200,000. We're trying, what we do with this is let me explain the spreadsheet, because basically what it does is it take the first column there is it takes the assessment that Norfolk County has assessed us. So you'll see the 3.2, that's the amount that if we pay it all in July, that's what we have to pay. And so that did go down 97,000, right, from the prior year. And they're proposing to transfer 275,000 from the reserve fund. And so what I did is we ran this spreadsheet to basically say, okay, look, if we fixed the operating budget to say, we only want to have a 2.5% increase to this FY24 amount. Okay. So we're going to allow only 2.5% to come into the operating budget. Anything above that gets assessed by the county, we're going to take out of this reserve fund. And so what this does is it shows you that by 2029, there's $867,000 left in the reserve fund. It also, it takes out the very big amounts later in the closer to the point in time when it's fully funded. So you see the 275 goes to 337, then 432, 533. So that last year, the 756 that comes out of the reserve fund. And that's all just to sort of freeze this year, FY24's operating budget, equal to what it is at 24, and it only goes up 2.5%. Okay. So you can see the assumptions down below basically are that the assessment goes up 5% a year. We earn 4% on the reserve fund, so it's invested, we earn 4%. We limit the cost, the net cost to 2.5%. And then the starting balance in the reserve fund is another assumption. So, this is, the other way to do this, Ed, is you could say, well, I know they spoke with someone from PERAC to see what they thought of this plan. And they were fine with it. They said that they did recommend leaving something in that fund, because when you get to 2030, there could be additional, assessments that come through that nobody thought about now. So I think it's conservative. I think, it does take advantage of drawing down this reserve fund and leaving something there. And if we have to look at this every year and see how we're doing, right?
Sure.
And if we're in a situation where it's maybe the assessments aren't coming in
At 5%.
at 5%. So maybe they're less than that, and in which case we don't need to cap it at 2.5, or we could pass more of it on, we could
Right.
save more and take more out of the reserve fund.
Right.
Or if, maybe if they're higher than 5%.
Which they were 9.5.
Yeah.
Yeah, Steve, the other item too that they mentioned to us, it does behoove us to keep balance there, because if Norfolk County changes their actuary,
Right,
then all your pieces to that game board change.
right, yeah, right.
But
I may not have understood what George just said correctly, that's his me. But did you say that if we pay the full 3.296, that 275 on July 1, we get 2% of that back?
No, well, no, if you don't pay it on July 1st, it's 2% higher.
Oh, so there's no reason.
If you make two payments, it costs 2% more
Okay,
as opposed
okay, I
to.
misunderstood. I did.
So basically, this, you kind of have to start somewhere with this process, right? And sort of read, the theory is, let's freeze it at this amount and let it grow at 2.5% and see what happens. And I think we'll know probably in 2-3 years what's
right.
are they gonna push this out more? Or is it really gonna happen in 2029? So. Yeah. But the beauty of this is that these withdrawals from the reserve fund are smaller now and bigger later. So you have time to adjust,
Mhm.
yeah.
Well, what is I'm not against it at all, I'm just asking, what is the entity that made the decision, rather than get this done by 2040, we're gonna shoot to get it done by 2029?
Do you know the history? I think it's the county that this retirement board made that decision. I'm not sure why they did that, but maybe they got some feedback from, I don't know. Do you know the history of that decision?
I thought that the state initially wanted everything to be paid by 29, and then they allowed an extension.
Yeah, maybe that's what happened.
And some places took the extension.
Maybe they,
That's-
but they have never, they've always stuck to this 29 date, right? They haven't veered off. The county has always,
That was more than that though, Paul, wasn't it?
was it? Oh, you think they had a later date and they moved it
I
up?
think so.
Okay.
I think it was.
Maybe they just got lucky and made some really good investments. I don't know.
That 2040, federal, that's just a state mandate?
That's a state mandate, I think.
Isn't there for private corporations on a defined benefit plan like that, do they have?
I don't know.
mandate?
They'd be governed by ERISA, and state municipal are governed by ERISA.
Right, but
I don't know the
for
answer
the
to
private
that.
sector, I wonder if they have a deadline, because it's, you know, it's been an issue for as long as we've.
A long time, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah,
Right, since
yeah,
I
yeah.
got out of college.
Yes.
I
Yeah.
feel like 6 years.
Yeah, several.
So Michael, are you online, Mike?
I am here, Mr. Chair. How you doing?
Good, good. I just wanted you to see this slide because in FY30, you see our assessment drops dramatically, like by $3 million. And everybody's gonna, you know, some of that we're gonna use, theoretically, you could use to fund OPEB. So.
Now,
could talk-
would you theoretically, sure.
Not all of it.
Well, that was my question.
Nobody wants to use all of it for
Right.
funding OPEB, but you know, I think a lot of towns are in Norfolk County are looking at that as an option of
Yeah.
funding their OPEB liability. Yeah.
And so in addition to the yearly, well, at that point, it's gonna be, what, it's 475 this coming year, and then it'll jump year to year. Would it be in addition to that amount, or in place of?
It's 525 this year.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we could. I mean, we'd have to study that and look at it,
Yeah.
which is, you know, it's kind of a nice segue to the OPEB presentation that Andrew's gonna give, but the last slide here is basically just every year they need to get PERIC's approval for what comes out of the pension reserve fund. And this is just a letter from them approving it. There's a slight little typo they made with the fund balance, but they corrected that in a subsequent email, so. All right, so unless there's any questions on the pension, we might want to go on to OPEB. All right. Andrew is going to take us through the OPEB. Mike Pastore is on, a former chair of the Warrant Committee.
Don't say that too loud.
And the chair of the OPEB Trust Fund Committee. So we thought it would be helpful to have Mike, you know, sit in for this presentation, and he can add any color he wants to. So, all right, Andrew, take it. Tell everybody what OPEB stands for.
Other post-employment benefits. OPEB is, so we have, when somebody retires, we have insurance plans available for them after they retire. And this has some similarities to kind of the same thing with the pension system, except we're the ones that are in charge of the funding and everything involved in it. We have our own OPEB trust account that we put money into, and that hasn't been mandated for a set date of when we need to have it fully funded, but.
Yeah, so the background on this, just to give you a little context, is that these are commitments that the town has made through all collective bargaining and just in general for all town employees. This is basically when they retire, we pay for their health insurance. Most of this deals with, there's a small life insurance piece, but it's we don't pay 100% of their health insurance. But Andrew will take you through that. But that's what this liability is. It's actually our biggest liability as a town.
So our budget request this year is $525,000, and following the new financial policy that was set. My bad. Okay. Skip to the next one. So I think I kind of explained this. So for retirees, so we have, when you get to the age of 65, we have employees that are required to go on Medicare. We have a Medix 2 plan that they go on as well. We pay, town pays 50%, the employee pays 50%. We also have a small life insurance plan, but it's not a whole lot compared to what we pay for health insurance. So like the valuation that you saw with the county, so we hire our own actuary to put together an actuarial report calculating our liabilities, how long it, at the current rate, how long it's going to take to pay down until we're fully funded. They also have a bunch of variable calculations that they can involve, discount rates, healthcare costs, life expectancies. Current discount rate we have is 7%. That went down a little bit from the prior year. So our net OPEB liability as of fiscal 22 was $28 million. That went up from the prior year. Mostly, I think it was to do with maybe they had some changes in their valuation that they did.
The discount rate declined, right, Andrew?
The discount rate declines, and I think they also made adjustments maybe for life expectancy.
Well, there's, as you can imagine, there's a bunch of assumptions in here, right?
Yeah.
I think the discount rate's the most impactful one, but we also changed our funding. We changed the funding formula, and that resulted in sort of a, less money going in sooner than what we were our old policy had, so.
Right. And the assumptions in years past have actually helped us significantly. Our overall liability has decreased more than, the amount of money that we have put in because of some of those assumption changes. But we in Georgia, and Andrew, correct me if I'm wrong, but we believe that we're sort of at the end of the line of, those kind of helping us out.
I think it depends. It could go up and down.
Yeah, I mean, healthcare costs is a big assumption too,
That's a big
right?
assumption.
And so that's now, those have been going up quite a bit in the last few years. We may get some reprieve if we're able to, change the plan design, maybe that will have helped us in the future, but there's a lot that goes into these valuations. But
just like the amounts of reporting against contributions could change it wildly too.
yeah, right.
So this here is.
What's the next slide? Okay. Yeah.
So this here is where we stack up with other towns where what proportion we have fully funded. This is the same report from last year. This only gets updated every couple of years. So we're a little on the low side for how much we have fully funded for the towns in our area.
The other thing I noticed, if we go back, is that our discount rates is still above average, I guess. Yeah. That did come down, right? That this past year,
Down to
yeah.
7%.
Yeah. And that's probably gonna go down more, right, but next year, but yeah, so I mean, it's nobody likes to see the liability go up, but I think there are some reasons for that,
Right, and compared to where we were when we started the fund in 2016, I mean, You know,
Right.
we're obviously much better position than we were then, but also than our, comp towns, I think we really, it was one of those times where Medfield really kind of was the early end on the curve there. And, I think we're just, where we are now versus where we are then, it's not even close.
Does say though, doesn't it make the question, are we putting enough?
Well, yeah,
$5 and a quarter, but it only go up 25,000 a year.
right. Well, this,
It says,
and that's a good segue to sort of the takeaway from a lot of this is that I'll let Andrew explain. We've asked the actuary to do a funding
Okay,
assessment, funding schedule with multiple scenarios, you know what I mean? Like three scenarios to answer that question of like, because right now we're kind of guessing,
right.
which we come up with, we put in a certain amount in every year, but there's no study behind that or when it's going to be fully funded
Right.
or what, and so that money is in the budget this year for FY24 to do that, to basically have the actuary, they could have done it. We didn't want to pay them, but it's never been done. So we figured it's good.
No,
It's good. Where money worth, it's only a few $1,000s, I think, to do it. And
Right.
at least you'll have some clarity on kind of where we're going and how we get there. So.
So this here, so this is what we pay, so we currently for retiree, premiums, we pay everything out of the health insurance budget. We're not dipping into this, OPEB trust to pay for any costs at the time being. So this is what it is historically, FY23, as.
I'm sorry, we're not tipping into the OPEB trust to pay anything at all right now?
No,
Yeah, that's correct. It's just building up. So like you saw, you'll see the amount of the amount of the unfunded liability, about
Right.
20 whatever million. That's the gross liability, right? So then, is there a slide on that?
so the gross was 34.
30,
the net was
34.
28.
What's that?
The gross was 34 and that was 28.
Okay,
So
so the
this,
difference is what's in this trust fund.
Right.
so this amount that we're paying comes out of the same fund, which we're paying the employer share of all our current active employees.
Correct.
Okay.
Yeah, it's,
So once we're fully funded, in theory, that fund should be able to pay most of the retiree portion year
Yeah.
to year.
yeah, there'll come a time, right? When the operating budget won't have this expense in it, that all of the payments will come out of this trust fund.
And how many World Series will we have won by the time that thing goes? Never mind.
Not this year.
That's the theory, right, Mike?
We'll be testing it.
Where do we see that payment, the 903 of the 781?
Okay, that's on,
What line is that now?
There's a
there's a
separate
separate
slide
slide on that. It's right,
right up on the screen.
it's right after the slide on the towns, the benchmarking.
Right.
Right after that slide,
Right.
the next slide is the one where it has the premiums in it. You see it?
I've got it, yeah, but where do we see that on the budget?
Oh, I see, I'm sorry. I
Oh, the
didn't
budget,
understand.
yeah. It's
just being away.
so it's all in
No, I
health
didn't
insurance.
understand your question.
It's all in health insurance.
All in health. It's
So
all part of the health
he's broken
insurance
out the
fund. Okay,
retiree
that's that
piece.
piece.
Yeah,
Okay,
this is just the retiree.
right.
So this here is our history of paying into the trust fund over the last 5 years. 5.5 is in the 500 the year before. This is under the new financial policy that we set, which was 500,000 as a base plus 5% increase every year.
Yeah.
Previous to that, we had 425 plus 10% every year. So we've had some changes in the history of it. Fiscal 21, we didn't raise it because of COVID. We had some restrictions with the budget. So that's going to do that. To do the changes in the financial policy, our actuaries estimated that our expected final payment moved from 13 years to 17 years, changing from a 10% increase every year to a 5% increase. And so we're trying to get a study, which is in the accounting budget for fiscal 24, kind of an actual set schedule. We can add a couple plans in there and try to see, could we put a little bit extra money in there? How much would that time be cut down to pay everything, or if we change rates, blah, blah, blah. So we're gonna have 2 or 3 different methodologies that we're gonna try to calculate to figure out if we wanna potentially change the way we're paying it. So.
Yeah, and this, I think, is where, you know, probably some thought needs to be put into what are those scenarios, right? And sort of, because I think, you know, one scenario could be you kind of just continue on this path, right? That we're on. What does that do? And then maybe another scenario is we increase we increase the payment in 29 or 30, fiscal 29, 2030, when we have that extra money,
Right,
in the operating budget from the fully funded pension.
right.
And you could do one time at that point, or you could, you know, just increase the 500 up to, or maybe, you know, maybe they find you know, maybe fully funding this in 17 years is too aggressive. Maybe we should, you know, do more or not. Maybe it's not aggressive enough. I don't know. They
Right,
need
it's good to know.
Yeah, it's good to know because we're just guessing right
Yeah.
now.
Right, we
Yeah,
just guessed.
yeah. So that's the theory. Thank you, Andrew.
Thank you.
Mike, do you have anything you wanted to add on that?
No, that was great. Thank you, Andrew, and Warrant Committee. Thank you for everything you're doing. And Steve, I gotta say, having slides, that was something that never occurred to me when I was chair. Much more organized meetings these days than were 3 or 4 years ago.
Well, you know, we always have you in mind if there's an opening, I know.
I'm sorry, my connection is bad here. I mean, that's how I became chair of OPEB. I kind of zoned out while Gus was talking, and then he looked at me. I said, "Yeah, absolutely." And turns out he was telling me I was going to be chair. But no, thank you. Happy to be back, and anytime anything comes up, please let me know.
Okay, well, great. Well, thank you, Michael, and thank you, Andrew.
Yeah, Mike.
Appreciate it. All right. What's next on the agenda here? Update from town finance.
So, I distributed, or actually Brittany had distributed at the beginning of the meeting, the updated budget worksheet. As I mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, the only real change, you've seen the budget variance at the bottom of the spreadsheet. has gone down to 615. I think last time we met, it was about, it was a little closer, or it's over 7, yeah, I was gonna say a little over 17,000. But
So just remind everybody, how did we get from the 740 down to the 615? What were the,
so the biggest change, or the only real change rather, was the state aid figures that
State aid,
came out
right.
last Wednesday or Tuesday. The governor released those. Those will progress as the Commonwealth budget process goes on through the spring, and then hopefully will be signed by the governor in July.
Yeah. So we were initially assuming a level funding on state aid.
Right,
It came in, I think,
1.1,
around 1.1, yeah,
so they only picked up 125,000 from that,
yeah,
yeah,
it's better than nothing.
Better than
Yeah.
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 So
What about chapter 70?
That's included
that's
in that,
included in that.
Oh, boy.
that total, yeah.
yeah, yeah, so not. That's the total, right? That's 70 in unrestricted state.
So that promise of funding the schools and wonder how circuit breaker is gonna go. Remember that promise was the state was gonna give us, the governor was giving us a lot more money to the schools. So it didn't come out in state aid, didn't come out in chapter 70.
Yeah, so I'll have to take I'll double check the different categories that the total is correct, it's broken out into,
Yeah,
on the DLS website. But
Is the circuit breaker usually included in the state aid number, or is it that
well,
separate?
It's separate,
Okay,
but yeah, I wouldn't, so if you didn't get it there, maybe we're gonna get it in circuit breaker.
yeah, okay,
That should be helpful.
yeah, that would be helpful.
I'm sorry, what's the circuit breaker they're talking about?
That's the money that the state gives to the school systems to help offset special ed costs.
Okay,
Yeah,
We'll get into that when we go through the school budget.
yeah, you'll, on the 14th,
On the 14th.
I'll work.
you'll get a whole lesson on that.
so no major updates since we last met. Like I said, that was the only substantive change to the budget worksheet. Hopefully by the time we meet next, the number will be even lower. So we keep it going in the right direction, we'll be to zero eventually.
Well, we know the insurance, if the insurance happens, that's like 400 grand right there, so
Oh,
that's a,
oh, it's that much. Okay.
yeah, so it puts us within, shooting.
And the various town committee, unions and other groups have till March what to get back to us?
I believe they're voting, or I believe we'll have the answer by Wednesday or Thursday of next week.
Okay,
So by this time, so today's Tuesday, so maybe by, tomorrow, we should have a little bit more of a clearer picture of how that's gonna shake out.
okay.
We won't know on
Oh, no, it's
Monday, but by the 14th, we'll know, yeah. And hopefully we'll have it all solved by then.
Yeah. So unless there are any specific questions about that or anything else budget related, I can dive into the opioid settlement funds.
Sounds good.
So, I know this has been in the news a little bit, so I won't bore you too much with some of the details, but the Commonwealth has reached settlements with a number of pharmaceutical companies, opioid distributors and the like, about over prescription and overuse of opioids. So the state has settled this sort of massive lawsuits, or excuse me, individual lawsuits with all these individual companies. All the money is being collected by the state in it's called an abatement fund. 40% of those funds are to be allocated to the participating municipalities. And so basically what happens is every time there's a new settlement, all towns in Massachusetts have the option as to whether or not to sign on to the settlement. Or excuse me, settlement funding and agreement. As of last week, Board of Selectmen had authorized Christine to sign off on all the settlements that were available. So to date, we're participating in all the settlements. So like I said, 40% of those funds that the Commonwealth has settled on will be going to participating towns and cities.
Yeah, this is just one thing, and the alternative would be we retain our own counsel and try to sue on our own.
I believe so, yes.
Got it, okay.
And so I think how it generally shakes out is each town is assigned a percentage of the total settlement cost. I don't know how that percentage is reached. I think we're around 0.2% of the 40%. But you know, no one's that high to begin with. And as I'll show in a minute here, you know, I think the amounts were a little bit more than we were expecting. There are some strings attached to the using the funds. They aren't, you know, just available for any general purpose. They're to be used for opioid abatement strategies. The town right now is thinking of using the funds to hire a clinician that would be shared between Council on Aging and Medfield Outreach. So we'll be able to hit sort of, you know, different demographics between those two departments. So that's sort of our game plan for now, and obviously we view those as eligible purpose for using the funds. I can now pull up the projections now.
The explanation has to be a permanent FTE.
Yes, so that would be a permanent FTE funded by the settlement funds. As I'll show in a second here, the settlements range in duration. We'll be receiving at least one settlement through fiscal 2029.
If this goes on for a while.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe Mather and Brett will be worried about that.
He's only modeled, what, 10 years or? How many years have you modeled, like?
Yeah, I'm looking at Andrew's. That's why. Oops. Okay. All right, so this is only showing 24 to 31, but if you scroll over, you'll see that we'll be receiving this one right here. So this is
39, FY 39.
one of the distributor payments. It's sort of a lump sum. My understanding is it's a lump sum that's been settled with a number of distributors as opposed to some of these other ones that are with specific companies. So that one in particular we'll be seeing through fiscal 39. Obviously, the Walmart one is much shorter, so they vary in terms of amount and length of the settlement. To date, we've received about $92,000 in using these projections. And I should emphasize that, you know, per the Attorney General's office, these are just that, they're estimates. You know, you can see each fiscal year what we would expect to collect. In particular, the Walmart one, when I've been emphasizing that these are estimates, the Walmart settlement is a little bit different in that they've told us that they're going to give us almost $51,500 over 6 years. But all they've said is, we're going to give you most of that in the first 3 years, and then the last 3 years, we're going to give you a little bit less than we did in the first 3. So this is a purely speculation, which gets into a little bit of why we think that the establishment of a stabilization fund to manage these funds moving forward is the right
So
call.
you pay the person out of the stabilization.
Right.
We're gonna hit the general fund.
Exactly.
So it gives us a little bit more flexibility, allows us to be more strategic.
No, that makes sense, right?
The alternative would be for any unexpended funds, so for instance, this $92,000. If we said, okay, we're gonna hire a clinician for $60,000. Or I don't know if that's to be the figure, but let's just use that as a round number. The remaining 32,000 would roll into free cash. If the person wasn't hired on July 1st, any unexpended salary would then roll into free cash. So we're really trying to make sure that these funds don't go into free cash because they're to be used for specific purposes.
Yeah,
Then we'd have to wait until the following town meeting to appropriate them out of free cash.
Back to the stabilization.
yeah,
Exactly.
this
So-
makes total sense to do this, yeah.
Yeah,
So this is sort of the reasoning behind reopening the warrant, requesting the town meeting to approve the creation of a stabilization fund, and then dedicating the settlement funds as a revenue source for the stabilization fund. And each year we just be able to allocate what we need,
right.
as opposed to, oh, this year we got 12,000, next year we're getting 53,000. And by the way, Walmart changed their mind and now they're gonna backload the last 6 years. It's just,
Right,
it gets a
Yeah.
little difficult when you're trying to plan it out.
right.
So we're gonna see two articles on this. One to create the stabilization fund and the other is to appropriate these amounts into the stabilization fund.
So these ones in green are the ones that we had signed on to previously. These ones in gray, the 1, 2, 3, the 5 of those, the Board of Selectmen just authorized us to sign on to those. Again, these totals in row 11 are estimates, but by the end of fiscal 39, or whatever year it shakes out to be, we're confident in, I guess, the total. But again, these are all just the estimates, and for that reason, given that they are estimates, the stabilization fund gives us the flexibility in using the funds each year.
Will you need to do a transfer too of the 92 into the stabilization fund?
Yes, although if we set opioid settlement funds as a dedicated revenue source, do we need to get a vote for funds we've received already? And then a vote for funds that we are to receive in the future?
I think you're going to vote on them as you get each year.
Well, no, if you have it as a dedicated source for the stabilization fund, you don't need to vote them in every year.
You have to vote them out.
You have to vote them out. But for the first year, I don't know if we need to do a separate one to move that.
I think for this first year you have.
You might have to do a transfer this night. Where's the 92? I assume it's in some account. somewhere.
Yes.
Yeah, you're gonna have to get it in there, right? Yeah. That's good. At least you're starting off with a substantial balance. If you transfer that in. So that the stabilization fund will have some balance. That won't get depleted right away. Yeah.
I think the initial thought was that the fix to allow municipalities with a little bit more flexibility, and so that these wouldn't roll into free cash, but
Yeah.
that is yet to materialize, so just to have this.
Sure, the legislature will be right on.
But better just to have this sort of tool in our tool belt.
Yeah. Yeah, that seems like a great idea to me.
Yeah, that's really good. And a good use of money too, for the town.
Yeah, it's a nice that they, everybody, that impacts everybody, right? So it's nice that they have the senior center and, Medfield outreach, it's good.
And I know Kathy McDonald, I think will be in on Monday. I think his school should be here on Monday or the.
That's
But I mean, whenever Kathy.
Council on Aging, is that, no, Medfield outreach.
Outreach.
Yeah, I don't know, Jill, do you know
March
when?
6th. Yeah,
March
Monday.
6th, okay.
Yes.
So I know she'll be excited to touch on this a little bit as well.
Okay, good. Okay. Is that pretty much everything you had, Frank?
That's it, I got.
Okay. All right, I think we just have informational items left. Just remember to get back to me if we haven't scheduled your budgets for one of the 2 or 3 meetings left. Oh, one thing I do need to talk to everybody about is that the warrant hearing date has changed. That was going to be, remember, March 20th. Now it's going to be March 28th. So that's a meeting that everybody has to be at. There was a scheduling conflict with the selectmen and a Trinity presentation, so they moved it to the 28th. So our hearing will be the 28th. I assume the warrant will get printed like the next day or two, right? So we gotta have to be through all our financial warrants by that time. It gives us a little extra time, but they did just make that decision this week, so if you know, on any of these dates that are left, the 6th, 14th to the 20th, we want to, you know, I don't know.
Well, we're still gonna meet on the 20th, even though that's.
I don't know, that's up to the year. I think that's the one that we probably would. If we don't need it, we wouldn't meet, you know.
Okay.
No,
That was
Yeah.
taking information. I wasn't-
that's a good question, because they just sprung this change on us, you know, this week. So if we don't need it, we won't meet. We might not need it. If we're able to get through everything, you know, by the 14th, that would be good. All right, so that's in terms of dates. I didn't have anything else other than I know the school building committee hasn't met.
They're meeting Thursday.
Thursday? Okay. I did see some of them I went to the open meeting law training.
Oh, great. Yeah.
And it was loaded with school building committee. members.
I bet.
As well as a lot of people at the back of the room here too. But
Yeah, that was
yeah.
my fourth meeting this week, so I get off out of that one.
Anything else? Anyone else has the? If not, then I guess we take a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second,
All right.
Aye.
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 And Jillian?
Hi.
All right. Okay, we are adjourned. Motion to pass.